So one of progressive media's rising stars is Kim Iversen, and you know, there's been a lot of controversy about her recently because of some of her tweets, but I kind of want to get into everything I feel about her in general, and somewhere in the video, maybe on the thumbnail, maybe in the title, I've said something about her being like Dave Rubin, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way. I'm not saying she's a sellout like Dave Rubin, but some of the similarities is that she's part of sort of these leftist people who generally hate the left, as they call them, because even though I don't really agree with her definition of the left, you know, including a lot of mainstream Democrats, it is a sort of, you know, mindset is that these people are so bad, I'm going to bend over backwards to defend conservatives, and I'm going to use a specific video to prove my point in how she sort of bends over backwards to say how bad most Democrats are and how good Trump is in one area. And of course, I'm not saying she supports Trump. She makes it very, very clear she does not like Trump. She really dislikes him, but I think she gives him way too much credit in her effort to bash mainstream Dems. And if you're sitting there thinking, Tabernacle, I've heard you say a million times about how bad the Democratic Party are in general, how that if they don't, you know, nominate someone like Bernie Sanders, you should vote third party. And yes, I do think that. I do think, you know, that quote about the Republicans and Democrats being like two sides of the imperialist party, I do think that as well. But at the same time, I don't think in your attempt to bash them, which you can find lots of legitimate, you know, reason to, you have to bend over backwards to make conservatives look better, and I think she really does that unfairly in this video I'm going to specify. So she has a lot of content and it's very long, and you know, I was watching a lot of her videos and I was thinking, you know, I don't want this video to drag on for like half an hour, maybe even longer, so I just picked one I felt summed up most of my problems with her. And just before we go any further, I want to say, you know, I don't really want to bring people down. You know, if Kim is ever, you know, going to watch this, I'd say I really, you know, respect someone doing this on their own, you know, becoming this sort of news host on YouTube and doing everything on their own. She's got a very good voice for it. She makes like, high quality videos in terms of like the presentation side, but I think it's a lot of style over substance, and I think she lacks some of the substance in certain areas, and I think foreign policy is a big one. But I don't really want to bring people down for no reason, so I'm going to try and be totally fair to her in this video, and I'm going to show, you know, her overall point of the video, which is a good point, but I'm going to break down how throughout the course of her nearly 20-minute video, a lot of her points are really bad before she winds up at the good conclusion. So the video in question is called Some Dem Candidates Are More Dangerous Than Trump. And of course, you know, you'll think about this, maybe there is a legitimate point to this. And so I'm going to play you the end of the video to really show you the point she's trying to hammer home. And I think it's a point most of us would agree with. So, you know, take a look at this quick clip.
We should say, look, our first priority is we do not want to be a nation that goes around killing kids and killing mothers and fathers and people at weddings, and we don't want to be that nation. And then second on the list is Medicare for all, because that is also life and death. Once we get the military industrial complex reined in on, then it's Medicare for all. We've got to rein in on the greedy healthcare companies that have been killing people because they refuse to give them the treatment they need.
So she's basically saying we should be anti-interventionist, we shouldn't be helping with the bombings, you know, in Yemen, or we shouldn't be carrying out foreign policy that results in loads of kids being killed by drones. That is a perfectly good point, and I like how she links it to Medicare for all, because 30,000 Americans die every year from not having health insurance. So that is a good point right there. We can all agree she's not, you know, fundamentally a bad person. She's not like Dave Rubin, you know, selling out. But there are some problems throughout her video, so I'm going to break it down. So to start with my first problem, here she is talking about Trump and North Korea.
For example, North Korea. Everybody thought he was crazy when he decided to reach out to Kim Jong-un rather than just bullying him and going strong. Instead of going strong and flexing military might and saying, you know, we're the United States and we're going to get you. You know, he did a little bit of that, but at the end of the day, he says, you know what? Why don't we just meet? How about we sit down and try to be friends? Let's have a bromance. Let's exchange love letters. Let's be friends. Let's talk about how much we adore each other.
So here is the start of my problem. She said Trump did a little bit of flexing, you know, with, you know, the military might of America in terms of North Korea. Apart from he literally said he is going to nuke them and don't provoke him or he's going to rain down nukes the likes of which you've never seen. That is probably one of the most provocative statements in US foreign policy, maybe history. He's literally on Twitter threatening to nuke another country with nuclear weapons. And that caused so much tensions to rise in the region. He's not just simply saying, North Korea, be careful, we're going to use our military might. He literally threatened to nuke them on Twitter. I don't know if she's just forgotten this or she's just trying to make the broader point that Trump isn't that bad in terms of this issue. But I think he's super dangerous because, before what they did is sanctions and everything like that. And obviously sanctions are bad, they kill lots of people. It's not like the Trump administration aren't doing the same thing. But, President Obama didn't threaten to nuke North Korea on Twitter. Most of the presidents before, even though some have been more aggressive, like George Bush, they haven't threatened to nuke North Korea, especially since it's got nuclear weapons. No president has done that. So she's giving Donald Trump way too much credit here and seemingly ignoring everything he's said about North Korea until the last couple months, where he's tried to have more of a bromance. Now I'm going to play you the next part of this clip, and this is where the problems really, really get even worse. So here you go.
He took a totally different route that I don't know anybody else would have taken. I'm confident that no other Republican would have taken gone down that road. And I'm pretty confident that many of the Democratic candidates, if they were sitting in the Oval Office, would also not go down that road. Many of them would feel like the only choice is to go to war.
So she's saying that Donald Trump would not start war with North Korea. But some Democratic candidates, if they were in the White House, definitely would.
They would believe their advisors. They would believe the narratives hook, line, and sinker. We've seen this. We've seen with Elizabeth Warren. Her foreign policy is terrible. She believes the narratives every single time. The woman has a lot of great domestic policy ideas. Many of them are Bernie Sanders ideas that she's taken. Some of them are her own and new. But when it comes to foreign policy, she just says exactly what the narrative is. And she would absolutely, if she were sitting in the Oval Office, would surround herself with Obama and Clinton era war hawks and would absolutely be marching us into conflict.
So she's saying that the Democratic candidates would trust their advisors and march into war with North Korea, one of the biggest militaries on the planet, has nuclear weapons, has one of the biggest stockpiles of chemical weapons. She thinks the Democratic candidates for president, any of them, are going to march into that conflict. What kind of logic is that? Donald Trump is probably not starting this war because even he knows it literally would plunge the world probably into World War III. And I've made a video about, the Taiwan issue and how North Korea fits into that in Japan. A war with North Korea would be so devastating in that part of the world. Millions and millions of South Korean civilians would die probably in the first couple hours because North Korea would target, the capital, they'd target loads of civilian centres. So if you think Elizabeth Warren, just because she might have some advisors from the Obama administration or advisors from, the Clinton administration, she's not going to start a war with North Korea. That is just total insanity. And it's so beyond reason because, I have so many problems with the Democrats. I don't want Elizabeth Warren to win the nomination. I don't want any of them to win. But even if the worst candidate among them got in, he is not or she is not going to war with North Korea. Even in a Iraq and Afghanistan world, this is just not happening. Because the amount of casualties would be so high and the threat of nuclear war would be so high. No candidate is doing that. And that is the biggest problem with North Korea at the moment, is because they've got such an array of weapons. It's just hard to get Kim out. With this deterrent and with his army and with his stockpile of chemical weapons, there's just no way to get him out at the moment. And that's, part of the massive problem with North Korea. She should know this. And, saying Trump doesn't want war, but these people do, it's just crazy, especially when Trump fills his cabinet with the neocons who gave us the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. So then she goes to Venezuela and says, Trump isn't so bad there because he didn't intervene militarily, but, he still put massive sanctions on them.
When it comes to Venezuela, what did we see recently? Trump said he lost interest. Wow, okay, not bad. All right, great. You lost interest. So he had all of these advisors around him saying, we need to topple the Venezuelan government. We need to get Maduro out of there. We need to get Guaido in. And Trump was going along with it for a little bit and did the sanction thing and probably meddled with their electrical grid, which caused the blackouts. But at the end of the day, saw, you know what? I don't know. There doesn't seem to be a lot of support for this Guaido guy. So lost interest, moved on.
And she said she feels in the video that danger means killing people.
Because to me, dangerous is very obvious. It is life and death. So somebody is dangerous when people are dying. That is the worst thing you could do sitting in the Oval Office, is to murder people.
Well, what do you think sanctions do? Putting sanctions on one of the poorest countries at the moment in that region, where most of the population live in poverty, putting sanctions on them is going to kill people. Like it did in Iraq in the 90s, it killed hundreds of thousands of people, including children. I don't know how much ignorance you need to have to think that Donald Trump putting sanctions on this country does not affect them. You know, she's saying he messed with the electrical grid and everything. Okay, just because he didn't invade doesn't mean he's not killing people directly through US intervention there. And I just don't understand this logic of sort of just giving him credit where he doesn't deserve it. So now she talks about Syria, so let's get into her comments on this issue.
Same thing now with Syria. Syria is another example of this. So many said, oh, well, we've got to get Bashar al-Assad out of there. What did Trump do? He did a few things here and there, but at the end of the day, he says, you know what? The terrorists are gone. We got rid of the terrorists. We defeated the terrorists. So that's it. No more talk really of Syria. I guess Bashar al-Assad won, and Trump has moved on to the next thing.
So you see there her completely simple understanding of the war in Syria. So she thinks Donald Trump, the only thing the Trump administration has done in Syria is maybe, done a couple of things. Well, 2 bombings without congressional approval, for one thing, of Syrian targets. But what she is completely missing out is that the Trump administration has really withdrawn a lot of rules of engagement for fighter pilots, for bombers, and for drones. So more civilians are now dying in Syria from US airstrikes. I don't know why she is not even talking about this. And to give him credit saying, oh, he's done a couple of things, but not really. So I'm going to read a little report about how badly the use of drones has gone up since Donald Trump came in. So recently Trump has changed something, so you don't actually have to report the civilians you killed. So President Trump has made it even harder to lift the shroud by allowing the CIA to keep secret how many civilians are killed in the agency's airstrikes outside of the Afghan, Iraqi and Syrian war zones in places like Yemen and Pakistan. So in general, they're clamping down on actually reporting who they've killed. So Mr. Trump revoked that order this month. His National Security Council called it superfluous because Congress had subsequently passed a law mandating that the Pentagon publicly report any civilians killed in any of its operations. But the law covered only the Pentagon, not a separate CIA drone campaign, which has broadened under Mr. Trump. Experts say that under Trump, airstrikes have surged in Afghanistan, Iraq and Syria, as well as in Somalia. In Yemen, it is unclear to what extent the Americans, as opposed to the Saudis, are responsible. In Afghanistan, the number of American strikes that killed or injured civilians more than doubled in the first 9 months of 2018 compared with the corresponding period in the previous year, and killed more than 150 civilians, according to the UN.
The worst thing you could do sitting in the Oval Office is to murder people.
I'm going to expand this even more. So Mr. Trump has also eroded constraints on civilian casualties. Since taking office, he has rescinded rules that required the military and the CIA operating outside of hot battlefields like Afghanistan and Iraq, like I said earlier, to limit their targets to high-level militants rather than foot soldiers. He also, by eliminating an elaborative inter-agency approval process, gave military commanders more authority to order drone strikes. So while at the end of the video, she says, I don't want to be bombing kids, I don't want to be bombing school buses, she is downplaying the expansion of these programs by the Trump administration in an effort to give him more credit than other Democrats and Republicans. Do you see how bad this logic is? She is essentially making Trump, even though she doesn't like him, look way better than he deserves credit for, because he's making these things worse. It's just a flat out lie. She's not being honest. And I don't know how much she plans these shows, because, before she started this Syria thing, it kind of sounded like she was talking off the top of her head, and I can appreciate that because none of my videos are scripted, apart from, the longer essay ones. But it just seems like she came up with this out of thin air and just didn't do the background research again, just like she didn't do it with North Korea. So this is why, I just want her to be better, since she does have a good platform and she is, very stylized. And I just want her to be better because she is a good speaker and she's a good, communicator. But if you're communicating falsehoods like this, it's just not good for anyone. So not only is she giving Trump way too much credit, she is also hitting Hillary Clinton a bit too hard, in my opinion, saying that if she was president, we would be military involved, or, probably this US, I don't think the UK would back you guys in this one, in Venezuela, in Syria, and in North Korea. all at the same time.
So far, those are three potential conflicts that we absolutely could have been in, which we likely would have been in had Hillary Clinton been president. Hillary Clinton would have been president. We would already be at war. We would have been marched in Syria for sure, North Korea very possibly, and Venezuela for sure. We would have already gone in and done the damage and killed people, blown up children, and escalated tensions, and been sending in our own troops, sending in our own kids, murdering our own people, murdering their people. That is the worst. That's the most dangerous thing you can do.
So I don't like Hillary Clinton. I don't think most of you watching this video will like Hillary Clinton. Don't most of you think it's pretty disingenuous to say that Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State under Obama, an administration that didn't, start another ground war, that she would lead the troops into Venezuela to topple Maduro, while also leading the troops into North Korea to topple Kim Jong-un, while also leading the troops into Syria to topple Assad? Do you think she would honestly do that? I've already spoke about North Korea. No one is doing that. No one is touching North Korea because it would kill millions. And it would probably it could kick off World War III. I've made other videos about this. And maybe because international relations is my speciality, because I have a master's in it and stuff, but I find this stuff infuriating to listen to, especially from someone who has such a big platform. Because it's just total, her opinion, but it's not really based in anything. Hillary Clinton is a war hawk, yes. Is she going to start 3 massive wars in her first time as president? No way. She is part of the Democratic establishment. The Democratic establishment might, like war in a lot of ways, but times have changed. Afghanistan and Iraq have changed it. Ground war is not happening anymore. Massive ground invasions are not happening anymore. Whether that is Trump or Hillary Clinton, it's just not happening. Ground wars against one of the biggest armies in the world with nuclear weapons and chemical weapons is not happening. It is definitely not happening at the same time as wars in the Middle East against Syria and a war in South America against Venezuela. And how bad would that look for America's image on the world stage? Everyone who watches this video, you have to be super disingenuous to think that is happening. Maybe one of its own, Syria or Venezuela, if she made the point specifically about one of them, saying, maybe I fear Hillary Clinton would go into one of these countries with more force than we're using now. But at the same time, she's not making this point. She thinks all 3. And then, like I'm saying before, she's given Trump way too much credit. She's saying, in my opinion, civilians dying is dangerous. Well, Trump is killing civilians in Venezuela, in Syria, and North Korea, and the US constantly has because of the sanctions. Sanctions affects the poorest people most. That's why it doesn't work. You're trying to make the population get so desperate that they'll revolt and overthrow, but it generally doesn't happen. So this is just, pretty infuriating to listen to, because as someone who doesn't like the Democratic Party at all, I've made numerous videos about how much I don't like them. I just think you have to be fair still. You have to be fair. And I would say Donald Trump is more of a warmonger than most of the candidates running at the moment. And I don't think Hillary Clinton would be doing all these things like she said she would. And she's given way too much credit, because now people be like, oh, I'm listening to this person on the left. I'm glad I voted for Trump because he's not starting all these horrible wars. Trump isn't killing civilians. She just told me he's not really doing anything in Syria. He's not really doing anything in North Korea. He's not really doing anything in Venezuela. It's all, he's just leaving them alone, apart from, he's obviously not, and he is killing people. So I, just want people to be better when they're criticising things like this. So now she goes on to talk about, the rest of the candidates, including Harris and Biden, and what they would do if they were president right now or president coming up. What would they do in terms of these foreign crises?
Absolutely are more dangerous candidates than Donald Trump. For example, Kamala Harris, her main advisor was Hillary Clinton. Her sister was an advisor for Hillary Clinton. And you know that if Kamala Harris is sitting there in the Oval Office, she would surround herself with Obama-era and Clinton-era war hawks, and we absolutely would have already been into conflict in these regions. That is absolutely what would have happened.
So her logic here for Kamala Harris is because Kamala Harris might surround herself with Obama-era and Clinton-era war hawks, she would go to war in North Korea, Syria or Venezuela, or maybe one of them, or maybe 2 of them. She would definitely do that, and that would happen. Is this some sort of joke? It definitely wouldn't happen, and if you're surrounding yourself with Obama war hawks, when did Obama say, he was going to go to war in Syria? He didn't even enforce his own red line about chemical weapons. So how, through that logic, does that mean Kamala Harris is going to go to war with Syria? When did Bill Clinton and Barack Obama start another ground war? When did they do that? Can someone please tell me? Because they didn't start a large-scale ground war in their terms. Obama inherited Afghan and he inherited Iraq and he still fought them. But he didn't start a new one. Clinton didn't start a new one. So I don't understand the logic that when you put someone from these administrations in, you're going to start massive invasions of other countries. And I would get the point if she's saying, these people are war hawks, they're not really any better than the Trump administration. Sure, there are some differences, but they're still going to carry out bombings, they're going to do more sanctions. I can understand that logic. I can understand the logic of Democrats aren't that much better than the Conservatives. I don't understand this logic as Trump is great for not doing any of this stuff. Kamala Harris definitely would do it, because that is just not true. So now she goes and talk about Iran, saying that the Democrats would get to war with Iran.
When I look at some of these other, Biden, what do you think Biden would do? Biden, once again, would surround himself with foreign policy advisors and he would just listen to them. Hook, line, and sinker. Your number one concern is defeating Donald Trump. So even if that means putting in someone in office that is going to march us to war with Syria, Venezuela, North Korea, Iran.
But hang on a second. Now she's saying Trump is going to go to war with Iran.
Now, we very well might go to war with Iran because Trump is very much in bed with Israel. He loves Israel, and Israel 100% is controlling this. And if Israel drops bombs, we're going to be right behind them. So that is a war we absolutely might actually end up in, and that would be really bad. But my point is, another president would have also marched us into that war, as well as others.
So her logic here is Trump is in bed with Israel, so if Israel starts bombing Iran, the US is going to join them. So how does that make Trump less dangerous than some Democratic candidates, and especially ones like Joe Biden and people who, follow the same line as Obama? Obama, who, negotiated the Iran nuclear deal. But your logic is some Dems are going to be worse for listening to Obama foreign policy advisors, because then they will go to war with Iran. But now you've just admitted that Trump might go to war with Iran just because Israel does it. And of course, because he has neocons in his administration. So with this line, you've completely ruined your whole argument. Because you're basically saying now, Trump is going to put us into war. Trump is going to listen to people like Israel, because he's so in bed with them. And you're saying that people who follow Obama advisors are the ones who are actually going to do it. But Trump is against war, apparently. So, you can see the logic here is just not consistent. And this is what I'm wondering in general. I don't know how much she plans these videos. I don't know if she's reading off a teleprompter. But it kind of seems like she's not, because it seems like someone just talking to try and, make their video even longer and just coming out with a lot of points that might not really be backed up with any evidence. And I just find it interesting how she kind of forgets her own argument towards the end of the video. And I really don't agree that, Obama would start a war with Iran. I don't even agree that Hillary Clinton would. Since they're so, the Democratic establishment loves Obama. They love Clinton. You think Clinton's going to ruin Obama's legacy by ripping up the nuclear deal and going to war with Iran? She's not going to do that. And this really just shows my whole problem. She's bought into the myth that Trump is some sort of isolationist. He doesn't want conflict. He doesn't kill anyone abroad because it's just not worth his time. What a great businessman. He doesn't really want to spend American money, waste American lives. He's not dangerous at all. He hasn't killed anyone in Syria, Venezuela, or North Korea. He hasn't done that. And if you voted for someone like Hillary Clinton, you know for a fact she would be leading the charge and getting you into war in Iran, in North Korea, in Venezuela and Syria, possibly all at the same time. Does that really sound realistic? Does a person saying this really have a good knowledge of international relations? Does a person saying this really have a good knowledge of history? And I think this is my problem with more newsy style content. Is, do you honestly think in a post-Iraq and Afghanistan world, a lot of this is going to happen? To any administration, do you think any administration can start 4 massive wars at the same time, even 2 massive wars? But to say that Donald Trump, in a neocon administration, totally in bed with, like she says, Israel, totally in bed with Saudi Arabia, is not dangerous. And can I just point out one more thing? No other administration, I don't think, would give Saudi Arabia nuclear weapons. Trump is trying to give Saudi Arabia nuclear weapons. I think that is far more dangerous than what Obama done in his administration. I think that is far more dangerous than what a potential Hillary Clinton would do. You're giving a fundamentalist Islamic country that exports the ideology of ISIS around the world, where most of the 9/11 hijackers came from, where bin Laden came from, where a lot of his funding came from Al-Qaeda and things like that. You think that is not dangerous. You think Trump killing loads of civilians in Syria isn't dangerous. You think him killing civilians in North Korea and Venezuela through sanctions isn't dangerous. But apparently Hillary Clinton is going to start 4 wars. Kamala Harris is going to start 4 wars. Joe Biden will do that. Barack Obama was really bad, and if they listen to his advisors, they're going to get us into more war. And the thing is, I showed at the start, her main point is being anti-war. Her main point is being, let's stop the bombings, let's stop bombing civilians, let's do all these things. And I'm going to make my point by saying Trump doesn't do this, and everyone else would, and all the Republicans would, and all the Democrats would. Every single one, apart from maybe Bernie Sanders and Tulsi would. And you're making a good point to begin with, but your argument is so bad, it helps rehabilitate Trump. It makes him look like the lesser of two evils. You're playing into this narrative a lot of people use in the campaign. Yes, Trump might have promised to be different in his election campaign. He might have promised to be anti-war, but he's not. He's filled his administration with neocons. He does what they want apart from the ground war, nearly completely what they want. He kills people. He is killing more people than Obama did at this point in his presidency. He's up in the drone program. He's even saying you don't have to show the civilian deaths. He's saying you can target more civilian heavy areas. And you're there on your video saying to your platform of 145,000 people that Trump is good for these things, where everyone else will be bad. And to finish my point on this particular video, I don't like the Democratic Party. I think they're warmongers. I think in a lot of ways they're pretty similar to the Republican Party. I'm just not naive to think, that Hillary Clinton would start 4 massive wars. I don't even think she would have started 1 massive war against these regimes. I think Syria is maybe the one place that was the most dangerous. I don't think she would have interfered in Venezuela. I don't think she would have interfered in North Korea. I don't think she would have invaded Iran. And I think most people would back that up because she was part of the first Obama administration. I doubt she's going to rip up his legacy by getting rid of the nuclear deal and just warmongering and intervening all over the world. So I don't know how long this video is going to be, but there's also more problematic aspects with Kim, namely her tweets. Now, I think she has a bot on Twitter that deletes her tweets after 30 days because I've actually had a Twitter disagreement with her and I couldn't find it because it's obviously been deleted. But she's still in the last month tweeted a lot of, stuff that isn't really helpful to the left and is kind of weird, especially in terms of racism. And if you guys remember, I don't remember what it was exactly because she deleted it, but she put some racist shit on her community tab. And then she tweeted out that the reason Asians have done better in America than black people, or something similar to that, is because Asian culture means you work harder. And I think it's obviously a very, very weird take. And so I'm going to read out some of her tweets right now. So, responding to a Guardian news article that says, black US lawmaker says white man told her to go back where you came from. She replies to this, should people be nice? Yes. Just like people should share and say please and thank you. But here's the reality, folks. The US is one of the least racist countries in the world. Racism is not our big fight. This is distraction from the real issues. Are you kidding me now? Are you kidding me? The thing is, the point you could make is, in terms of diverse countries, Europe, the US, the UK, they're pretty diverse. And in terms of being a diverse nation, they don't have problems with racism in a way you'd think other countries would if they were as diverse. But that doesn't mean they don't have more of a problem with racism, because they do as a result of this diversity. So for the US, for example, the US literally is founded as a racist slave state. And why that is different to other countries is because it's way younger. So slavery is part of its laws. Racism is part of its laws. Nazi judges went over to the US in the 30s to study the law because they thought it was the country with the most comprehensive laws in terms of race, more than even South Africa. And then they studied it, wrote reports on it, and brought it back home and implemented it in Nazi Germany. And the US has never really reconciled with its problems of race. And you're telling people the US is not racist. On the left, we try to be allies. If we aren't, people of colour, and I know Kim is Asian, but if you're not, a black person, for example, I'm not going to tell black people in the UK, racism is not our fight, when I know the country is racist. I know the UK is institutionally racist in a lot of ways. It might be better than some other countries, might be better than the US, for example, but I'm not naive enough to think it's not racist. And to use your platform on the left to say racism isn't our fight is crazy. You should be fighting for racial, justice, for social justice. That is just part of it. I don't understand the logic. And how dangerous is this for someone with such a big following? Think of how much more followers she has than me, and she's spreading stuff like this on top of the video. So another one, being a bit insensitive on race, she says, I myself, as a single woman walking around alone sometimes at night to get home, really appreciate the cops who patrol my neighbourhood. I take the time to thank them. LAPD, you are welcome in my Venice neighbourhood and I'm grateful. So, part of being, I guess on the left a lot of the time, you don't really like police, especially police in America who are institutionally racist. And even as a British person, I know that LAPD are infamous for being institutionally racist. You know, the context of the O.J. Simpson trial, the reason he got off in a lot of ways, because they just thought, yeah, it's the LAPD again. You know, that filming of that kid getting beaten by the cops just before the O.J. trial, and in California in general, you see how racist the police were. And they've been institutionally racist for a long time, and they still are. So great, you can be thankful for the police, whatever, but at the same time, it just plays into your lack of sensitivity on race issues. And then this is the worst one. So she's talking about Kaepernick and, you know, the whole Betsy Ross flag on the Nike sneakers. So she said, "Can someone honestly explain to me how the Betsy Ross designed flag is a symbol of racism? I was waiting for better answers than the time period it represents, but never heard one. Betsy Ross was a woman who couldn't own a slave, who has essentially owned herself and had zero vote or say about the world around her. She's one of the only celebrated women in our nation's history, and how dare anyone try to erase her or paint her as some monster. Women are the most oppressed group in the world. I will not allow women to over and over by Colin Kaepernick be overlooked and ignored. Colin Kaepernick sure seems like he hates women." So because Kaepernick, it wasn't okay with an old US flag being used on a sneaker because he says it depicts a time when the US was founded on, you know, slavery, Kim's take is he must hate women. And women, you know, are oppressed. And there's this great, you know, feminist called Elizabeth Cady Stanton who wrote something called The Women's Bible, talking about how the Bible is inherently sexist. And there's a reason it was written in a certain way. Great people like that. And her logic is ridiculous. Because women were oppressed at the same time, that means, you know, we should be celebrating her rather than calling her out. You know, I started this video saying that she's not like Dave Rubin. And I've kind of had an evolution of thinking during the video because some of these takes are just so ridiculous. I don't understand the logic. You know, how can you be a leftist commentator and have this ideology? And she would say, "You're trying to force your opinions on me." Well, if you're for social justice, if you're for all these things, if you want to be an ally to communities who are oppressed, you know, I want to be an ally to like the black community. I want to be a fighter for, you know, social justice. I want to help gay people and all those things. I want to help trans people. And that's where sort of my core comes from and how I'm informed in these issues. She reminds me of these people on the left who literally just do stuff to really stand out. I kind of find a lot of the Tulsi support over Bernie now is like, you know, we want someone even further left calling out, you know, the wars and stuff. Like Bernie hasn't done that. I find it really weird. And her takes in that video lack any knowledge on the issues and just bend over backwards to give Trump credit. And then her tweets are just so weird. And they lack any nuance or they lack any sensitivity on race issues. And, you know, I think it should be called out because, Kim, if you've watched this, I doubt you ever will and I doubt you ever have. I just want people to be better in general. And, you know, it's not a difference of opinion, really. You're just saying stuff that you haven't researched properly and then you think it's the right thing to say, but it's not. Like this stuff in your video, it's not just your opinion, it's factually wrong. And that's why I have such a disagreement with you on it. It's, you know, we can all have political disagreements in the end, but most of your stuff is just not in, you know, the realms of reality. It's just your opinion based on, I guess, your own biases and your own logic, but you haven't researched a lot of these topics enough. So anyway, let me know what you guys think of the video. Let me know if there's anything else I should have covered. Let me know what you guys think of Kim, and let me know if you think I'm fair in my criticism. If you want to find me on social media, follow me at The Tabernacle on both Twitter and Instagram. I also have a WordPress blog, so that's just The Tabernacle WordPress. Check that out. I also have a Patreon now, and I'm super grateful to everyone who gives me a bit of money to financially support this channel. It's actually pretty crazy, you know, people actually do that. But, you know, massive, massive thank you. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.